episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SCS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It is not a tagline. It is our reality. You're about to see why. You're in for a special show. The headline today, of course, we are covering the Ivy League killer. His name is Luigi Mangione. He had an undergrad degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree. And NYPD is saying that that is their man in connection with the shooting death, the assassination of UnitedHealthcare Group CEO Brian Thompson, who was laid to rest yesterday. And the headline today is that Luigi, who was picked up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, is now fighting extradition. Before we go any further here, this is on the left. With all due respect to David Sarney, Phil's on the show every Friday. He is America's most respected detective, Phil Waters. Spent decades in law enforcement, became an expert at obtaining criminal confessions. I believe he has a 93% confession rate and 96% clearance rate. Spent 23 years working as a homicide detective in the Houston PD, investigating over 400 homicides. And Phil sent me sort of a hate-love text message last night saying, hey, how come I'm not on the show? And I explained to Phil, when you're as big a deal as Phil is, I am so respectful that I do not bug him on any other day other than Friday, but you can tell it's in his blood, in his bones. So I'm glad he offered to come on today. Next up, Dr. Joni Johnston, a forensic psychologist, a private investigator, a crime writer. Some say she looks just like Ashley Judd. You can decide yourselves about that. She's also the author of Serial Killers, 101 Questions True Crime Fans Asks, and she hosts her own YouTube channel, Unmasking a Murderer. And then perhaps the second, if not the first, most respected detective in all of America, retired David Sarney. He was with the NYPD 27 years. Most of his work dedicated to conducting criminal and narcotics investigations. He was involved toward the end of his career in training the next generation of detectives at the Detective Bureau. He now teaches at the best criminal justice school, John Jay College in Manhattan. Welcome to all three of you. Phil Waters, I'm going to start with you, and the hat is unreal. I can guarantee you're not finding a better panel anywhere on the YouTubes or the traditional medias for that matter. If you do, I'll give you your money back, but I am so confident that I will make that promise to you right now. Detective Phil Waters, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has now come out saying he's seeking a governor's warrant to secure the extradition of this guy because he is now fighting extradition. Why fight? There's a question right here from Lorna McKenzie. Why fight it? And he's going to lose. But what does this governor's warrant mean?
Well, David can probably speak to that better than I in New York, but the governor's warrant is going to be to get this guy back to where he belongs. And I'm not surprised at all that he's fighting it. I think now that he is where he is, he's the headline. And he's grasping all the attention he can. We've seen here most recently within the last 2 or 3 hours that his being transported in the orange suit. He's made his first little outburst so that everybody can pay attention to me. So the guy's a sociopath. He's a narcissist. He's kind of the classic example of that. So I'm not surprised at all that he's fighting extradition. He's going to go back to where he belongs.
Yeah, he had a little bit of a fit today, which we're going to show, and I'm going to get Dr. Joni's take on that. But first to retired detective David Sarney. He's got an unbelievable voice, by the way, straight out of like 1950s Mad Men. I love it. But David, to you, in terms of the investigation, and I was speaking to other law enforcement officials, but as it pertains to the NYPD, the job is really now just getting started. What are they doing back at NYPD within the department?
Well, thank you for having me again. I will tell you this: they're probably we used to do called marshaling of the evidence. Whatever they have right now, they're just getting everything in a row with that. The case is not over, and that's the one thing, because that ghost gun is an issue. He looked relatively clean when he got picked up in Altoona, so he was somewhere from between Pennsylvania and Altoona. He did something. So I guarantee you that they're backtracking still again to see anything that connects with him. The ghost gun, I guarantee they're going to look at the ghost gun. They're running it for ballistics to see if it matches anything ballistically to the shell casings left at the scene. There are things that are still being done on this case. And I feel could agree with this. The investigation doesn't end with an arrest. It's going to continue onward. And the amount of data, the amount of information, now you're doing I call it a perpology. You're going back on him. You're going to scrub everything he's ever touched when it comes to social media, bank records, financial records. All this is still coming into play because we have to determine, they look at him as the lone gunman. And this is what it comes down to. But somewhere along the line, he fell off the planet in a sense with his family and his friends. Who was he associating with within those last few months? And where did he get the knowledge to meet up with the victim at that time, at that place? And that's the things that are still looking into. I guarantee you, detectives are working tirelessly. Midtown North Squad, Midtown North, Manhattan South Homicide is still working this case.
Yeah, and Detective Waters has a bit of an obsession with that weapon. I'm going to circle back with him about that ghost gun, get his take on it. There's a question here. This goes right to Dr. Joni. Why would someone with everything, no history of mental illness, family, friends, Ivy League education, money for health insurance, do this? Make it make sense, doctor. Good looking on top of that with ripped abs that I'm jealous of on top of that. So why act out like this?
Well, let me just first of all say that I know I'm going to be wearing a couple of different hats. No pun intended, Phil, with your real hat on, but I'm not going to compete with that. But as a forensic psychologist, my job is not to make excuses for anybody, but it's to try to understand and explain. And it's important to point out that does not mean that it justifies anything. But because this guy really did seem like he had everything going for him. He had a loving family. He had a great upbringing. It sounds like he went to a prestigious school. It also sounds like there were some significant health issues in his family with his mom and with him. And, there certainly were some, I guess, I don't want to say warning signs in terms of we can trace this back and say this was going to happen. But when family and friends who've come out, particularly friends who've come out and talked about this guy kind of disappearing starting in the summer and isolating himself from friends and those kinds of things. And we look at somebody who's going through some kind of depression, mental health issue, that's not uncommon that we see a change in behavior. As a matter of fact, when I work with parents, that's the first thing you tell parents, the teenagers and young adults, right? Is you look for this change in behavior as a clue. Does that mean this person had a psychotic break? No. It doesn't mean they were out of touch with reality. They didn't plan something. They weren't premeditated, but it does mean the fact that his behavior changed around people who knew him, that something was going on that was out of the ordinary for him.
Back to Detective Sarney, because this is his wheelhouse. The second-degree murder charge. Obviously, New York brought murder charges late last night. That was one of the headlines. They're asking why the second murder charge and not a first-degree charge. And I've got a list of charges we could put up in a minute.
Well, we talk about first-degree murder. It usually deals with law enforcement primarily in the service of their duties. Murder 2 is something I believe they're going to have enough to go with. Sometimes you don't always want to charge too high. There's going to be a litany of charges in regards to this case. So murder 2 is, the intent cause death is there. That's not necessarily the issue. It's an A1 felony regardless. So he's going to, if he's convicted, again, this is still the same thing. He's innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So that's why the detective's still doing this work. So you're still having to do things. The murder 2 charge, can they change? Could they upgrade? Could they downgrade? That's up to the district attorney's office. Unfortunately, it comes to police, and Phil could say this. We can ask for those charges, but it's up to the discretion of the DA to do what they're going to do. And if DA Bragg thinks this is the charge he wants to go with, then he's going to go with that.
Here from Rosemary Romero, comes to us outside Toronto, Ontario, Canada. What was Luigi yelling? I'm about to play this, and I'd love to I'll go in order. I'm going to get Phil, Joni, and David's take on this. This was kind of the big moment of the day today. This story is unraveling in so many different directions, but as he's coming out here on his way to his extradition hearing, he screams and has to be kind of restrained by police. If you haven't seen it, this is it.
Down.
Oh my God! That's completely out of touch, and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
I'm going to play that back. Phil, it's not 1,000% clear what he says, but it's along the lines of it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people. I have more of the quote here. I'm looking for it. But when you see this, this is what he says. It's completely out of touch. It's an insult to the intelligence of the American people. You study people as closely, I would say, as Dr. Joni, almost in a different way. What's he really saying here? Are you surprised by what we're seeing?
No, not at all. I think this is a kind of a raging at the machine kind of an episode for him. And it's all these generalities, and it's all going to be revealed. And, you know, along the lines of what Dr. Joni was talking about here is that what I do when in preparation for an interview for a person like this, or for anyone for that matter, I'm always prone to do a psychological autopsy on them. So I want to know what makes them think, what are the influences in their lives, and so forth. So if I can find that, if I can get that information. So I don't think, I'm not seeing anything here that is a surprise to me. He gets out of the vehicle, and what's the first thing he do? He looks around to see if he has an audience. He sees all the cameras, he sees the microphones, and boom, he's on stage again. So he's very aware of his surroundings, and he's very aware of the media frenzy that he's generated as a result of the act of murder.
Look at that. Vesper emailed me. Honestly, Vesper, I didn't have time. She helps us so much. But look at this officer, Waldman. That would be my last name. I'm wondering if I'm related to this guy. A police officer in Altoona. I'm going to have to reach out. But kudos, by the way, to the Altoona PD for nabbing this guy. I'm going to play this back without audio one more time for Dr. Johnston, for Joni here. Let's watch this. You will see he looks around, like Phil said.
Down.
Yep, there he goes.
Oh my God! That's completely out of touch, and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
The last thing he says, it's like a lived experience, but he says it's completely out of touch. It's an insult to the intelligence of the American people. Dr. Joni, psychologically, what's happening here?
Well, if you look at some of the postings that he's made and things that he's said, particularly, for example, his Goodreads book review. I don't know if you've covered that in previous shows where he's talking about Ted Kaczynski and kind of, in some respects, supporting him and some of his actions. I think this is a continuation, as Phil was saying. This is somebody who's I think, who almost sees himself as this hero, or there's somebody who's going to come in and save the average American who is being unfairly treated by healthcare. And so here's his chance again. There's this audience. He does look around, look at all these people. Here's my chance again to further my message and my role as this kind of hero and savior. This is a story I think he's telling himself, not that it's true.
Right. And by the way, and I have it here, there's a very respected journalist who looks like David just popped off. Sometimes his Wi-Fi goes out, but there's a respected journalist who claims to have the actual 200 and I think it's 63 word manifesto. And I'm going to read part of that in a little while, and we'll get Dr. Joni and Phil's take on that. By the way, David will bounce back, but he's only with us till the top of the hour. And then you're with America's most respected detective and Dr. Joni Johnston the rest of the way. But Phil, something David caught my attention. He said that the ghost gun could be a problem for law enforcement and litigating this case. Why do you think he said that? I didn't fully understand or follow that.
I'm sorry, what was the last part there, Joel?
I didn't fully. Yeah, he said, David just said that he thought the ghost gun could potentially be a problem. Why do we think that is?
Well, I don't know what the context was for what he said there. In terms of the weapon itself, of course, you know from the show Friday that I became kind of very curious about the weapon. And first impression was, of course, that it had a suppressor on it. Once we found out what type of weapon it was, and there was some talk about somebody in Connecticut had been connected to this type of a weapon, and I had stated then that in order to get a weapon of this type that has a suppressor on it, you have to pay a $200 tax stamp to ATF and have it registered through ATF. So if he were to have purchased this type of weapon, it would be easily traced to the owner of the weapon. Now, what I have heard in terms of what has been released about the weapon is that it is a ghost gun, and parts of it were made on a 3D printer. That did not surprise me. I've got a nephew that years ago, probably 6-7 years ago, was talking to me about 3D printers and manufacturing, printing up parts to weapons. And that is evidently what he has done. Now, he's got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in some sort of engineering, computer science, computer engineering. So he's a smart guy, and he's the type of guy that would research this type of thing. And apparently he has gone and he's found a way by which to make this particular weapon. So the description I've heard of this weapon that he was caught with is you've got the barrel is going to have to be metal of some type. It's going to have the filings inside the striations inside the muzzle, and the lower receiver of it is plastic, much like a Glock is plastic, and the lower receiver and the slide is metal. So the bolt in this case is also metal. So you've got what I believe is, if it is in fact a ghost gun made off of a 3D printer, all he has to do is print those separate parts of that gun and put it together. And it obviously functions like it's supposed to.
Joni, you got a big job here today, because there are so many people, and it's disturbing almost to me, who are kind of rooting for this guy. And I'm not trying to call out aspiring court reporter, but this is kind of what we're seeing online. To answer the question on the screen, anyone can be radicalized by the injustices in our society, even privileged people. This is a guy who obviously, in some capacity, did not like the healthcare system, despite the fact that his family profited very lucratively off of it, having owned and still owning assisted living homes. But this is a guy who had a problem with that and took matters into his own hands. I mean, what do you say to the general public about sort of this defense of him? There's a lot of people doing it, and it's a very slippery slope.
I have really been amazed at the conversations that have happened around healthcare since this happened. And it's unfortunate, I think, that it's in this situation, because we can look at healthcare as a separate issue and talk about the pluses and minuses and the weaknesses and strengths of our healthcare system. But in this context, obviously, I don't think anybody condones what he did, although there have been people who have lauded him as a hero since this happened. And so I think that it is a slippery slope in terms of, is it possible for us to separate out this person who believed he had genuine grievances? There probably are plenty of people who have genuine grievances against our healthcare provider because they were denied a certain amount, or they think they made their deductible and then it was denied, and those kinds of things. Everybody has a diversity of experience with healthcare, but that's a separate topic, I think, from the way this person chose to settle it. But I would also say, as one of your listeners or watchers talked about, that when people start perceiving that they are being persecuted and that they have limited options in terms of resources. And, I don't know all the things that are coming out. As you mentioned, Joel, that you have a manifesto that's been kind of going around. I've seen parts of that manifesto. I don't know that it's been verified that it's his.
Yeah.
If it is his, let's just say for a minute that it is his. It does, I think, outline, his sense of, in some respects, his perception of being traumatized by, first of all, watching his mom go through a significant health crisis, and him listening to her in pain and feeling frustrated and helpless about all that she went through, and also getting denied, coverage from his perspective. Again, all we're hearing in this manifesto is his perception, even if it's true. On top of that, we have somebody who experienced chronic back pain for a significant period of time, had a back surgery, which it sounds like was not successful. Sometimes those aren't, and then goes off the radar and detaches from friends. And the really unfortunate part of that is that when we detach from friends, which is very common when people become very depressed or go through some kind of a mental problem, it's a time when they need that support the most. And not just support, they need a sounding board. Because, separate from any diagnosis or anything we might want to assign to him or might not want to, there's no doubt that this guy is not thinking clearly in terms of weighing, what is this action going to do for him? It's destroying his life. It's destroying the life of somebody else. It's not going to fix a healthcare system that he thinks is broken. So, it's hard to imagine this is a logical, good decision that he made. And when you start taking away that support system that you have and those sounding boards and people who can help you see that you're not thinking clearly in terms of the cost benefit ratio to yourself and to other people, you really take away a huge benefit and a huge source of objectivity.
By the way, COE, I'm seeing a comment. Are we taking the presser? Can you just check with Steve and see if I wasn't aware of any kind of presser? STS Nation, you guys are always on top of it. If something else is coming up, earlier there was a little brief news conference, and we got David back here, but there was a little brief news conference about the fighting the extradition. So Phil Waters, to you, there's some interesting questions in the chat. A very obvious one, and you heard Detective Sarney say that he had to clean up somewhere. He looked pretty decent for being on the run for 5 days. Do you think, and he was also obviously found with his weapon and his IDs, Phil, what do your detective instincts tell you? You think this guy was going to try to strike again somewhere?
He was going to try to do what?
Strike again.
Well, I mean, that's pure speculation, but I don't know. I sense that he felt like he accomplished something. He held on to the weapon. So there is certainly the possibility, if he felt like he was successful this go around, that let's give it another shot. No pun intended, of course. But I think that he's an example of what I say a lot on Fridays. Anyone is capable of any act under the right set of circumstances. This is a guy who, for all intents and purposes, grew up in privilege. I mean, his family is wealthy. They're well known. They built resorts. They're kind of a name there in Maryland. And he's gone to Ivy League schools. He's valedictorian of his class in high school. He's a smart guy. And I don't know where and I said before on Fridays, and we were trying to discuss, what would cause a person to do this, and there are all the conspiracy theories, and it was the wife, and it was this, and it was that, and it was this. And I said, it's going to boil down to something simple. Every case that I worked that looked like it had a conspiracy attached to it in some way, it always came down to something very simple and very direct. And I said on Friday, my impression was that this is going to be surrounding either the shooter or a family member having some sort of health issue, catastrophic issue of some kind, and the insurance company, in his mind, did not address it in the proper way. And sure enough, it looks like that is pretty much what motivated this. And then we get this information that he was in Hawaii and he was surfing and he hurt his back and they put pins in his back and he's suffering with pain and that kind of thing. And look, let me tell you something. That type of injury, if that is true, can cause people to do things completely out of character. I've had two friends of mine, officers, that had severe back problems, could never get rid of the pain. I think one of them, I think it was a psychosis. I don't think it was real, but it was real to him. And they both committed suicide as a result of that pain. So I'm not surprised at this guy striking out based on those factors.
Yeah, by the way, this is a live shot here, ABC 7 out of New York. Tom Dickey Law Offices. No one ever heard of this guy, except maybe some people at the McDonald's in Altoona. But today, the world will know about him. He is currently counsel for Luigi Mangione. Detective Sarney, to you, he quoted this earlier. Thank you, Frankie Figs. That's why I say we got best guest, but a better community. The attorney said, David, my client is not waiving extradition. He is contesting it. The judge then gave the prosecutors 30 days to procure a warrant from Governor Kathy Hochul, which will have to be submitted to the office of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Explain. I don't think a lot of people, including myself, know much, if anything at all, about a governor's warrant. How often is this used? I mean, it seems like it's just going to be a matter of, logistically getting it done. It's not like the governors are not going to sign off on this, but what is happening now?
It's a stall. You look at a stall tactic, and this is something you want to do. Eventually you're going to have the attorney, spouse, whatever he's going to use to do this. The governor's warrant's going to go through. You cannot expect them, that Governor Shapiro and Governor Hochul are going to not get this done, given the amount of evidence in this case to get, it's probable cause. The district attorney's office was there. They've conferred with this. They believe there's enough to arrest him for this. And it shouldn't take this long. But again, it's just what everyone does. It's stall tactics. And I guarantee you, as smart as he is, I'm going to presume, and I don't like to make these speculations, the attorney's pushing this a little bit too, because it's a great way to get yourself out in the limelight, to see, that now you have the shooter and the Midtown shooter as your client. Do what you need to do to, extend this as much as you can. So there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to use the legal process, and it'll happen. It will happen. He's going to be extradited, but it's going to be a battle. And once it's done, he comes to New York. We'll take it from there.
There you go. NYPD does not mess around. And look, I saw all kinds of, what did the NYPD do? Well, without them finding the video evidence and posting it, the media posting it, people in Altoona never would have found this guy. And by the way, I'm going to get to that too. There's some people who thought there were younger people, and they were kind of joking with each other, saying, "Hey, it looks like the shooter," and they left without saying anything. And before you know it, the older person, along with the help of the McDonald's employee, they figure out that it might really be him. And there you go. Dr. Joni, a question a lot of people are asking, and I'm curious to hear the detective's take on this too, is his picture was everywhere for the better part of 6 days. I think today is the 7th day, if you count all of Wednesday. And no one ID'd him. His family never came forward. Do you find that curious? Do you think people did recognize him, just didn't want to publicly say anything?
From what I can tell in terms of people's reactions, I don't think that's likely. I mean, obviously, I follow a lot of cases, a lot of crime cases. Obviously you do. Probably everybody here does. I don't think everybody does that. Yes, this has been a very, very high profile case. I'm not sure if my mom or dad had been watching a show when I was, 20 years ago, if they would have recognized me or been looking at the picture to see. So I'm going to say, I don't know that anybody recognized that. I guess the other question, which I think is a more difficult one, is if they did recognize him, what would they do? Yeah. And I think that's a difficult decision to make. I mean, obviously we know the right thing to do, right, is to call law enforcement, turn that person in. As a mom, as a, sister or mom, it's much more complicated, I think, when you're in that situation.
Yeah.
I do know that he'd also, I was just going to add that we know that he was reported missing, I think, by his mom. And, kind of toward the middle or end of November. So he has not been in touch with his family. So yeah. I'm just not sure how much they were following the news and looking at those pictures thinking, could this be my child?
That's interesting. This is the first I've heard that he was reported missing. I knew he was kind of estranged. He cut off ties with his family. Phil Waters, and we're joined by Rich Kaprowski, also retired NYPD detective. So got a full house here. And I know he's hopping off at the top of the hour, and we're going to take this press conference live, but thanks for coming back, Detective Rich. But Phil Waters, I'm going to read this family statement before this press conference happens. This is from, not only is he from family of privilege, but one of his cousins is actually a state legislator out of Maryland. And so he's kind of acting as the de facto spokesperson. This is what he put out on Twitter He says, "We only know what we have read in the media. Our family is shocked and devastated by Luigi's arrest. We offer our prayers to the family of Brian Thompson, and we ask people to pray for all involved. We are devastated by this news." The guy's name is Nino Mangione. I mean, Phil, you know better than anyone. This is not only obviously a massive loss to this person. Brian Thompson is the one we really should all be talking about, but the narrative always goes the other way. But I mean, this is a massive ripple effect. His family is going to be destroyed now, right?
Well, this is one of these things where it goes both ways. It's two sides of the same coin. And so the ripple effect here is not only the victim's family and friends and coworkers, but you now have the family of the shooter and the friends and the people that know him that are going to be affected in the same way. So this may sound strange to say, but I've seen it. This is a loss for both sides of this thing. And it sounds like the cousin that was speaking here, the legislator, it sounds to me like the going off to Hawaii thing is where they may have lost touch with him. So there seems to be a degree of separation between the communication between our suspect here and the family. And if they're saying right out of the box that they're as shocked as anybody, then that may be true. That may be the case here, because sometimes you lose touch. I've seen it happen with families that all of a sudden you go and you speak to them about what's happened to their loved one, and they're in shock. And I don't detect any insincerity here from what they're saying. So I think, great loss on both sides.
Yeah. David, back to you. And now I guess we lost Rich. It's kind of funny. We're juggling guests tonight, but I asked Phil this. I'm curious. You mentioned that he looked like he kind of cleaned up or had been, obviously somewhere in these 5 days. Do you think that he was planning? And I know this is speculation, but what's your gut tell you? You've got a lot of years of experience. You think he was going to try to do this again?
I don't know. I think what he did is he planned this shooting so much in his head. He knew what to do then. What he would do afterwards, I think he got a little confused. This is he's a first time, killer in a sense. So he was a little off. Would he do it again? I don't really know. I mean, I take nothing to chance, and Phil probably believes this too, that I don't want to make an opinion on anything. If I leave, I keep a wide open mind to this. Would he have, if he felt he was successful doing it, would he do it again? And I mean, apparently in his manifesto, he borderline admits the fact that he did it. So that's beneficial for the police. Would he want to do this again? Does he want to be the hero of the anti-healthcare establishment? I don't know. But I think this was his first time, and he was getting his feet wet. Would he, if he got successful and did it again? I don't know. I mean, he did everything right at the time of the shooting. What he did before and after was a total mess because he didn't plan that. He planned an escape. The escape happened within 2 minutes, and he put everyone on a wild goose chase. The Monopoly money found in the bag at Central Park, was that going to be a calling card of his that he was going to establish, throwing Monopoly money on the body? I don't know. It wasn't done. It didn't happen. So some things came into play, some things didn't. To speculate, to see what he's now going to play or use this as maybe his was he reading social media about himself? Because there was a lot of negativity and a lot of positivity on his end as being the savior of society in a sense. And I don't know if and you could see right then when he was able to, start espousing his terminology and espousing his beliefs. This is something, and I'm not a doctor. I'm a detective hack in this case. I deal with people just step on face value. I was hoping he'd make a statement to the detectives. I really was hoping that he would actually clarify why he did what he did. He didn't. Now you're going to see this stand that he's going to make.
Yeah. Detective Rich, to you, I mean, people are kind of hailing this guy as a genius. Obviously went to Ivy League school, Ivy League undergrad, Ivy League masters, all from Penn. And they're saying, look, everything, including his jersey ID, may have been a reference to Mario, and he's Luigi from the Mario Brothers. So everything was, perfectly planned out. The problem is the guy got caught fairly quickly. What about this? I mean, there's obviously bits of evidence like the monopoly money, but the manifesto, and by the way, there's one going around that's talking about the mother's neuropathy. I don't think that that's accurate, but there's another one also that I'm going to get to. But and right here, just look at this. I mean, I don't want to like amplify this, but this is everywhere. Luigi Mangione is a hero. But right now, Rich, what's your response to that, Rich, before we go any further?
In response to what, as far as him being a hero, or
yeah, just all this praise of this guy.
I mean, that's just that's stupidity. I mean, that's not even it shouldn't even be allowed. I mean, he obviously has problems with the healthcare system. We know that, but to say that and other people are probably in a similar boat as he is, but they're not going to go and get a gun or make a 3D gun and then go out there and kill CEOs. So I mean, listen, I know from what it says, he has back pain. Listen, I had back surgery myself, and it is excruciating. And yes, I would never think of killing people, but yeah, it does hurt. But I don't know. I think he's young and he's trying to make a statement, as we see, and trying in his head to help out maybe other people in his to make a change. But he went about it the wrong way.
That's for damn sure. He could have used those brains a lot differently. Detective Waters, to you, there's a couple of, questions that are lingering. That Mickey up here says, why would you keep the weapon in cash if you're not planning more? He also had a YouTube channel where he said he would reveal more. Channel got taken down. Let's start there. I mean, Phil, why do you think he was caught with his weapon on his person? If he was done, wouldn't he have just tried to throw it in a river or something?
You would think so, but I have read that he had some interest, if not fascination, with the Unabomber, who was had a manifesto, was very specific about who he targeted and so forth. So it would appear, I just let evidence lead me where I need to be. The evidence right there in that particular part sounds like that he may be modeling himself after somebody that he admires. Who was
Phil, hang on one sec. We're gonna take this. Sorry to cut you off. This is
Sure.
Tom Dickey, the attorney for Luigi Mangione. Hopefully the audio gets better. Audio is barely audible.
He has indicated pleas of not guilty. The only charges that we've seen thus far have been the ones here in Pennsylvania, and we have pled not guilty to those charges. And
what's his state of mind?
I really can't get into that. That's too speculative. I'm not going to get into that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't complete that. You said he has said he did it so far?
Oh yeah, we pled not guilty, at least to the charges in Pennsylvania. Like I said, I'm not aware of any actual charges in New York. If you were in the hearing earlier, there was a proceeding where they introduced some documents, which, as I complained about, didn't have enough information for me. So we're looking forward to getting that additional information.
When did that plea happen? It's not something I was aware.
Okay, well, hopefully, again, I was not at the arraignment yesterday. I hope he pled not guilty. I assume that's what happened. But today, when I entered my appearance, and for the record, he's pleading not guilty to it.
Right now, though, you're telling us that he is pleading not guilty.
That is correct.
He doesn't say you were under the impression, or you're trying to defend the client on the fact that he's not the shooter.
Listen, I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. So that's like I said earlier, and I wasn't kidding around. A couple of things: if you're going to report something, report it accurately, and remember. And this is not just a small thing. The fundamental concept of American justice is a presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I've seen zero evidence at this point, and so I'm not even aware of what any charges.
I'm sorry, that's just regarding the extradition request from.
Well,
New
the
York.
only hearing today was the extradition, so we're going to take one step at a time. It's a long process.
What
Can't
about
be
the
a long.
photos the police released, the NYPD release of him?
I'm sorry?
The photos the NYPD release of your client.
I don't have any control over what the NYPD does, and if they release something, I hope I can get my hands on them. And you guys get them, send them to me. I'd appreciate it.
Clarify something. You pled for him not guilty in the state of Pennsylvania about the charges here. Can you just, when did that happen?
Well, he has a hearing coming up. I believe it's the 20-something. I can't recall. A lot happened today. So until they haven't even had a prima facie case established yet, so they have to have a prima facie case established before the case can move on to the court of common pleas. The burden's always on the government, thank God, and that's their burden, and they're going to have to produce some evidence, and we're anxious to see it.
Understanding that you have said you have not seen drugs coming out of New York yet, that if and when there are, and you have seen them, will you be pleading not guilty to those as well?
That would be my expectation. That certainly would be my advice.
Your client's demeanor the past 2 days, the arraignment and again today at the hearing, at some points he was smiling, laughing. You had to actually tell him to stop talking. What are his feelings right now? He seems outspoken.
Well, he's obviously, I said earlier, use your common sense. If you put yourself in, you or a loved one in that position, it's, natural, I think, to go through many emotional states. As far as him not talking, as long as I'm going to be the lawyer, I'm going to do all the talking.
Sir, I don't remember any plea being asked for or entered.
Okay.
As
long as he hasn't pled guilty, that's all I care about. So.
In the Blair County case, it's just not.
Well, I'm telling you, as his lawyer, he didn't have any lawyer of record, and he didn't have any representation until I got involved. And I'm telling you, he's pleading not guilty to each and every other.
When does that plea normally happen?
At
the first hearing?
Like I said, normally that could happen at what happened last night at the informal arraignment, which is at the magisterial district judge.
So is he telling you this is all some sort of awful mistake?
I'm not going to talk about anything he's told me.
How do you end up in Altoona?
I'm not going to talk about that.
Has he been able to contact his family since?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that either.
Can you tell us when you were hired?
I can say sometime prior to the hearing this afternoon.
So you were hired and not appointed?
That is correct.
If Governor Huichol provides the governor's extradition, then does that change the timetable here? You still have the right to a habeas hearing, don't you?
Yes, sir, we do. Like I said, and I'm not trying to be, it's 24. I'm not trying to be a smart ass or anything, but when we've got to wait until we see things. When things happen, we'll react to that and proceed accordingly.
Since cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, which is normal and fine.
In Pennsylvania, that's the law.
Would you be able to give us a summary of what it is that happened in the courtroom today?
Yeah, today is basically what it was, and it happened fast. There was an extradition hearing scheduled. I found out about that about an hour or so before the hearing, and the initial thing is a person can waive extradition. And it was my opinion and my advice under the circumstances that he did not. And I emphasize the not because apparently there's news reports already going out that he waived his extradition. He did not do that. And so that's why we wanted to make sure we're going to use the process and use the Constitution and the rights that are available to any one of us in this room and any American citizen or person charged with a crime. So we're going to move forward.
That he should be eligible for bail. Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Talk about some of those reasons.
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, the Constitution says that all crimes are generally a bailable offense. Bailable offense means you have to set some form of bail. The exception to that is if it's a capital case, which means the Commonwealth or the government is looking for the death penalty. And I'm proud to say I'm one of the few attorneys in Pennsylvania that's qualified to do death penalty cases. But those which this is not a capital case, knock on wood, at least I'm aware of it now, or if a first degree murder, which carries in Pennsylvania life without parole. If the charge which you're faced with is life without parole, then you're not eligible for bail. Since the crime, at least what was set forth by the district attorney, was alleged to be a second degree murder, that's not life without parole. So I believe that bail should have been set.
But you also talked about like a home monitoring system was a possibility because his lack of prior criminal history. I mean, you really feel that your client should be out in the public. You do not feel that he's a threat to the
Yeah, now you got to understand, when you set bail, the judge could set $1 million bail. It could be $5 million bail, but you know, damn it, you get bail. That's what you do. And like I said, anytime you look at the criminal justice system, pretend you're that one in that spotlight. You're going to want to be out. And, you know, so yeah, I think he was entitled to bail, and the judge makes it 100 million or 10 billion or 100,000. He's entitled to bail, but to simply say no bail, in all due respect to a judge, I believe bail should have been set. I can't because I wasn't at that proceeding.
Is your client being held in solitary confinement?
I can't comment on that. I do not know.
What is the procedure the next couple of days? What are you going to do? What is going to happen?
I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I do have some things planned, but I can't get into that because I don't think that's what attorneys do.
Sorry, are there any other court proceedings in the next day or two?
Not that I'm aware of.
And that is on their end. Let's see if it unbuffers. Technology's got a ways to go. That was obviously a majority of the news conference. I'm going to jump in here. Detective Sarney has to take off soon. We heard all the important things there. The real headline there, David, to me.
That's not a crime. It's not a crime.
Are we back, COE? Hang on a second. Yeah.
I would not ever indicate anything that he indicated to me.
What's
I
his
can't get into
demeanor
that.
like? Is he worried?
Well, you know, I'm not going to speculate on that, but like I said, use your common sense. If you were in a jail or confined in a state where supposedly there's rumors going around you're going to be charged with murder.
All right. That's enough for me. We can watch the rest of that later. But someone said I was a combination of Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live and Joe Pesci, and that was about as accurate as a human could get on that one. That was pretty good profiling right there. So Detective, to you, Sarney, the headline here is he said that he did not waive extradition. Every headline says he waived extradition. I don't understand that. He also said that bail should have been set. And he admitted he was only hired this afternoon. He doesn't even know if he entered a plea yesterday, which I read that he did not enter a plea, but this guy plans to enter guilty pleas. What's going on here?
Yeah, to deal with the bail issue, bail from New York is a whole different dynamic. Bail is only to make sure someone goes to court. The thing about this guy, he's been a flight risk. They were able to, the judge concurred with the district attorney that they were not going to let him go, and that's fine. I mean, he's facing a felony gun possession charge in Pennsylvania. That's what they're detaining him based on. The extradition is part of this. It'll happen. It's just going to take time. And I will say during that time, it's probably best that now the detectives will do the dirty work of marshaling all this evidence together and getting it ready for when he gets to New York for that indictment. Because that's the next step is you want to make sure all the information's there. Because if this is the guy, you want to make sure he's the guy, and you take all the evidence that's available to you to make sure if this is the shooter, if this is the one who killed maliciously, callously, Mr. Thompson, then they're going to do their job. And that's why the DA's office went down to Pennsylvania.
And there he dropped out. I'm gonna pivot over to Rich, and David's gonna have to bounce in a few minutes, but I got to get better Wi-Fi at John Jay.
I think it was in our best interest to do today.
We'll check out the last couple of minutes of this, guys.
Well, from what I've seen at this point, he hasn't been charged with that. Okay, he hasn't been charged with that. But if in fact he would be charged with that, I would anticipate. Again, I don't really want to speculate. But if in fact that would happen, I would just anticipate a plea of not guilty.
Are you able to represent him in New York for the homestead?
If that would happen, that could be a possibility.
Will you accept public donations from those seeking to fund his defense?
I don't know.
How long will you be fighting the extradition?
As long as it takes to do it effectively and competently.
So just to confirm, you are also barred in New York?
All right. I had enough of that. I just bounced it off. So, Rich, back to you. Sorry, I got to mute that. Rich, back to you. This guy just got, put on the case today. How frustrating is it for detectives? You do all this like gumshoe hard work, and then you got these attorneys. I mean, it's their job. They're playing games, and they're trying to prolong and delay. And how frustrating, I'm just curious from your perspective, is it to guys that do the work like you?
Yeah, I mean, it is frustrating. But, having this occur in my career, you always are expecting it. I can say majority of the time they waive extradition because they're at a point where, all right, you got me. I'm going to go back and answer the charges. So yeah, it's frustrating to us, but as David said, it gives a little extra time to really, dot our I's, cross our T's, get everything, the DNA in order. Because DNA sometimes, especially in New York City, it could be, in this case, they can get it very quickly. Other cases, other homicides, sometimes you're waiting, 3 or 4 months for it. So yeah, but the games that they play is very frustrating to detectives.
Yeah. To Joni, this comment here, and then I'm getting to Phil. Lindsay Hendricks, with no cameras in PA or New York courts, I say we buckle up for misinformation and a massive game of telephone with media companies echoing one another and the few that were at the proceedings. There's all kinds of conspiracies already being developed. I mean, there's a guy in the chat before that said, I'm the guy that did it. So you don't have to look very far beyond our chat even. Is that just the way the world now with social media and the way things are? What's your advice to people who are trying to seek real information besides turning to STS? But what do people do in this day and age?
I think you covered it with tune into STS. That's pretty good advice. But is it the way they're? I mean, I think it's amplified by the social media and our access to information now. I mean, I think it's always been there. We've always gossiped. We've always spread what we know. We remember the telephone game when we were growing up. So I think that's partly human nature, that we're trying to figure things out. And part of that, unfortunately, is passing along information that we may not really know. And sometimes we pass it off as information that we do know. And so I think in terms of these situations, I think it is really important to be careful in terms of, where we're getting our information, making sure we're verifying it from more than one source, making sure we know where that information is coming from, and also just being patient, because it is very, we all want to know what the answer is when something like this happens. We want answers quickly, especially the whys. I mean, I don't think you have to be a psychologist to want to understand why somebody would do this, particularly somebody who, as many people have pointed out, seemed to have everything going for him. So I think it's just, like I said, it's important for us to be patient and, use different sources. And also, I just wanted to say, be careful about using labels, because if we're talking about somebody who's, quote, narcissistic, or somebody who's sociopathic or whatever, that person very well may be. But if that person is, we would expect to see that person behave in that way throughout their lifespan, at least as an adult. And so I think it's important to separate out. Yes, somebody may act sociopathically. They may act narcissistically in a situation. Does that mean this person has always been this way? Maybe so, and maybe not. So I think it is important to be careful before we use labels for people to be sure that they're being used appropriately.
Yeah. Very well said. Phil Waters, to you, and this is obviously a concern for the NYPD. What do you do, if anything, and I don't think there's a lot you can, about copycats. You see this with school shootings. Do you think in your gut that someone's going to try to, follow suit and pull a similar type of crime here?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of like David there. I don't want to even add fuel to that fire. I don't want to be in a situation predicting behavior. When it comes down to it, this is it's a murder that is in everybody's face. It is a high profile murder because of the individual involved. So I think that we're seeing these comments where there are people feeling joy about what happened to this man. So you're going to have people out there that are going to glom onto this. So it's my hope and prayer that nobody tries to reconstruct this into another event. I certainly is going to put a lot of people, not just CEO with health companies, but all manner of CEOs, oil companies, and so forth and so on. I've worked security when those were the big hot items, and you had, I had bodyguard work around the CEOs of major oil corporations. So, these men and women that are in these positions of huge responsibility, and the decisions that they make affect millions of people. This is part of the negative side of that. So, and these people that are now coming out of the woodwork that are gleeful about this, look, the fact that people are going to get offended, that's inevitable. But if you stay offended, that's a choice. So these folks that are out here now singing this guy's praises, I think are very misguided, very self-absorbed, and they themselves need to do a check.
Yeah. Steve Cohen says a check up from the neck up. I think a final question, David, you've got to run, right? I think after this. So
I have a few more minutes, so I'm no problem, but whatever.
Okay. All right. You let us know. I just don't want to.
My tech things have been driving me crazy. So
if you're at John Jay, you got to tell him to step up the budget for that. But
what was the
internet?
name?
I know. Well,
yeah, the attorney's name was Tom Dickey, I think. Is that right? Yeah.
Tom Dickey. Yes,
I thought it was Jerry Gallo.
Who's
no, Jerry Callow, right?
Who's that?
My cousin Vinny.
Oh,
right?
That's it. Yeah, it sure seemed like that. To Detective Sarnia here from Jenny Allison, always in the chat. I heard that the New York City DA, Alvin Bragg, and detectives are happy about him not waiving his right to extradition because it gives them more time to come up with probable cause. Is there any truth to this, Detective?
I wouldn't say they don't have probable cause. I mean, the district attorney's office was down there with the detectives into Altoona, so they believe they have enough for that. But it does give the department time and the DA's office time to go through all of this. It's a myriad of documentation and evidence. And Rich could probably say the DD5s are probably, and DD5s are the information reports detective use. There's probably over 1,000 plus. And it's good to sit there. The case detective can get a chance to take a little breather and look at the case, go over that with the prosecutor's office, with the DA's office, and go through it. And that's the one thing. The reality is he's in. They have time. The judge has ordered him to be remanded. He's on a felony case in Pennsylvania. The extradition will take place. The length of time could be changed. Who knows? This is one of the things. And again, attorneys are going to do what the attorneys do. I love his tie. I love the Nadia's in his tie. It was fantastic. He's going to do his job. And that's the thing. And I think as detectives and all of us know this, that we have to respect that. We're going to do our job regardless of the antagonistic feelings we may have toward the attorneys, the defense attorneys, but they have a job and so do we. And detectives are going to do their job. So it's not going to change because he's going to be in there a little longer.
Yeah, just ask Phil Waters. He loves attorneys.
Just to add to that, though.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Absolutely gives, as David said, the case detective now this is actually a kind of a relief for him to get things in order, because like you said, the DD5, the reports that we would do, there are, like he said, there could be 1,000 of them, and to get them in order, to get that case together. Now it's computerized, but still, it's still there's probably DD5s in that case that detective hasn't even read yet, from all the detectives that have worked on it. So now he can get some key information from those that he might have missed, and then be able to talk to the DA about that.
Rich, while I have you here, what about an issue? Because everyone's bringing this up. I like to get pretty much everyone's take on this. That he was in the right place at the right time, and it's probably not luck. Is there any concern that the NYPD has to have that he didn't act alone? I mean, someone came up with a crazy theory. Maybe he's got a twin, which we know is not true because they talked to his family. But how do we know for sure that no one else is in on this? Is that something that the NYPD is still working to confirm?
Well, yeah, I would think they will definitely do that, because, the cell phone they recovered, everybody's talking about, want to know who he's on the phone with. Well, one, he may not have been on the phone with anybody. He may have just been making it to hide his face to do whatever he was doing. Or he could have been trying to call somebody, didn't get through. But once the forensics comes back on that phone, they're going to be able to see at that time when he was walking and had the phone to his ear, who'd he call? And they're going to follow up on that phone number, on that person, if he was speaking to anybody. So, I mean, the theory that he might have had somebody else working with him, I'm not sure. He was he wasn't very clean with this, so I think he would have messed that up also.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, you want to take a stab at this? I mean, he was there. Initial reports were he was hanging out all night, but then they say he arrived 5 minutes before. I don't think he was following this guy. There wasn't a pattern here. He didn't know. The guy doesn't live in New York City. So what are your thoughts about how he knew where to be, and what to do and how to do it?
Well, I'm always the KISS principle guy. Keep it simple, stupid, right? My old Marine Corps training. Look, it was no mystery that there was a convention at this hotel in New York City. There's no mystery of who was going to be there. He's targeted this particular individual. He knows where the convention's being held. He gets there before most people are going to get there and lays in wait. And when he sees his target arrive, he strikes. I don't think it's, this insider stuff and all of this. Look, he planned this out. He's a smart guy. He did his intelligence work. He did his recon. And I think it's a single actor. Now, there's a possibility, of course. But I had a case where a guy was on the phone and on video. We were watching him talking on the phone. He hangs up the phone. He walks right in and he kills 3 people. And it appeared that he was talking to somebody he was really talking to someone on the phone, and he could be ordering pizza. He's not going to tell somebody on that phone what he's about to do or where he's at and what he's doing. So I tend to think that this is a lone wolf deal. I'm curious about a lot of things about the electric bike, the e-bike that he took off on. Where did he get that? Did he rent that in New York? I would assume there are all sorts of rental properties around there that rent those things out. So you track that down. I mean, in terms of probable cause, is all you need to file a charge, and they've got more than enough probable cause to file the charge. And I think David may have alluded to it earlier, but the investigation to gather and make sure we've got all of that evidence and put this thing together in a case that can be successfully prosecuted has just begun. So with his arrest, that's what's going to launch the second half of this investigation. And that's where they're going to start making this case. They've got a treasure trove of evidence right now, but this is going to make this case better as we start moving along further into the investigation.
By the way, that Detective Sarni, Joni, I'm coming to you on this question about the psych eval, but Phil just triggered it. The lawyer, Tom Dickey, said there's zero evidence. This guy got caught with a weapon that matched the weapon, the ID that matched the ID, 3 other fake IDs, the neck scarf that appears to be the same. I mean, how do you say that with a straight face? I understand they have a job to do, but I mean, are people at the NYPD laughing when they hear this?
You look at it and go, this is business as usual when you deal with prosecutors. I mean, when you deal with prosecutors, are going to deal with this. We deal with it. Defense attorney is going to say what they're going to say. And you can laugh at it. It's not a big deal. He's going to say this because what his whole thing is, he's going to try to create that doubt regardless, that everything is not what you see it appears to be. And that's what they're supposed to do. And for as long, and I know Rich has probably done it too, you deal with these defense attorneys, and some of them are former prosecutors too. So they already know the game. They know what to play. I don't know this attorney's background, but he's going to do this is his job. He has no idea about this case. He just got he just took the case the other day. So first thing you can do is, like every attorney, plead not guilty. And what do we have? Let's just refute everything that the police have, and we'll see what happens later on. And that's what he's doing. And again, he's not probably going to be the prosecutor. He's not going to be going to New York to deal with the prosecution of this case. It's probably going to be a New York attorney unless he's licensed in New York. So what he says is this. That's what he's going to do. That's what everyone does. And I don't take it personally, and it's not worth taking it personally, because once you do, then you lose sight of what you're looking to do. And that is getting the case cleared, getting all the evidence you have to make sure that this is the person of it. The suspect you have is the person you want. And that's the idea. He's probable cause to arrest. Now you're trying to build the case for the prosecutor. So this way, you know what all you have. And that's why the delay is great. It's not a big deal. And it's smoke. I mean, he had a press conference. Within 20 minutes, he said absolutely nothing in 20 minutes. The only thing I liked about him was his tie. He said nothing new, and because he has nothing. So just do what he's going to do. That's what all the defense attorneys will do.
Future agrees with you. It was nice. It was a nice tie and knot. There you go.
Well, I got a question. I didn't hear the first part of that interview. Is he store bought or is he court appointed?
It said he was hired this afternoon. It sounds like he's store bought to me.
By the family. Okay. Yeah. So he's the attorney representing
the PA charges.
This suspect in Pennsylvania. He's not the guy that's going to go to New York. I can't imagine he would be the guy going to New York. He's the guy they've gotten. For all we know, he may be a traffic court attorney. He gets people off at tickets.
Yeah. I mean, this family's got a lot of means. I won't be surprised if it's a very high profile New York City attorney. And there are probably some who are chomping at the bit to go up against the prosecutors and the NYPD. This I didn't know. I learned something new on my show every day because I got the best guests in true crime. But the family did file a missing persons report back on November 18th. That is on the right, his high school yearbook. Very top left of that photo on the right is the actual photo from his yearbook. That's the larger photo. And then you see them on the left side here. The question, Dr. Joni, to you, and I apologize because we got, usually have 3 guests. We've got 4 guests. So I'm trying to be as fair as possible here. But the New York charges, someone was asking about the psych eval, the valuation, and the opinion of the diagnosis. So who does a psych eval? When do they do it? And what do you make of a diagnosis that's attributed to him?
So first of all, the question would be, would he even participate in a psych evaluation? So if in fact he is the perpetrator, if in fact he is ideologically motivated, he sees himself as some kind of protector of the people or some kind of warrior or hero, then he might see that as somewhat, is minimizing, right, his message or somewhat questioning his message for him to in any way participate in a psych evaluation. So that would be the first question. The second would be, if he would go along with it, his defense attorney is going to be the one who has him evaluated, and they will probably hire somebody who's got a lot of experience with the courts, who may have, it'll probably be a forensic psychologist, somebody who's worked with people who've committed violent crimes. And the goal is going to be, depending upon what he pleads, if he pleads not guilty, they may be looking for mitigation or some kind of lowering of, the charge to explain those kind of things. It's hard to imagine that they would plead not guilty by reason of insanity. But if they did, the evaluation, of course, is going to be a little bit different, because in that situation, you're going to have to prove some pretty narrow things about what the person could appreciate right and wrong. And there's so much apparent premeditation in this case. That would be a pretty difficult road to hoe. So that's how that would work. And of course, if there's a psych evaluation, the prosecution could also potentially have him evaluated as well.
How long does it take to do this?
It really depends. Depends on the records. I mean, we don't know of any psych history this person has. We don't know of any, previous diagnoses or those kinds of things. So one of the things that separates a forensic evaluation from a clinical evaluation is the amount of collateral information that you're gathering. So, in a clinical evaluation, somebody comes in, you may do psych testing, you might talk to them, but you're kind of going, yeah, this person is telling me the truth. I'm going to assume that they're in here voluntarily. They're not under the gun. There are no dire consequences for them coming in. Obviously, in a court situation, it's different. So you're going to be talking to a lot of different people, parents, maybe friends, family, getting records, getting the school records, putting together a whole package, trying to track down where this person has been, what they've been doing, what their behavior has been like over the past, 2 to 6 months. So it can be very, very time intensive. It can be, 100 hours. It can be more than that, depending upon what the legal question is that the expert is answering. The other question that your wonderful audience had was diagnosis. And, I will say the same thing I always say, which is, unless I have sat down with somebody and evaluated them, I never give an opinion about their diagnosis. I don't know this person. I don't know anything about his history. I can also tell you, as somebody who, talks with violent offenders on a regular basis, that people that I have seen in the past, and this is relatively rare, who had no criminal history and who committed a violent act like this that was planned out, oftentimes had a history of severe depression, and they oftentimes thought about suicide first. And then, for whatever reason, that suicide changed to homicide. They began telling themselves a story that, well, yes, I'm depressed, but it's not my fault. It's this person's fault. Or in the case of murder-suicide, it's, yeah, I'm going to take myself out, but you're going to come with me. So that's what I've seen oftentimes in, working with other offenders who've committed, I don't want to say similar crimes, but crimes that have some similarities there.
And now that I have you, and it's now the Joni Johnston show here, Lindsay Hendricks. One more for Dr. Joni here, for Dr. B, but I think that's wrong. I believe that was her name. My apologies. What can we make of him being 26 and within that prime age range of schizophrenia manifesting in young adults and in young males especially? That is true, correct? What are the signs of that?
Yeah, it is true. So I would be very, very surprised if this person had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Again, not to diagnose him, but oftentimes schizophrenia starts by the late teens. We start seeing signs, and oftentimes we'll start seeing what we call the negative signs first, meaning the person will start acting a little bit oddly. Maybe they are a little bit socially awkward. They begin withdrawing from their peers. I mean, this is a guy who was valedictorian of his class, of his high school class, had friends, went to college. People seem to really love him, got a bachelor's degree, got a master's degree. So unless there's a lot of information that I don't have, which is probably true, that show this kind of slow deterioration, not just in terms of his thinking, but in terms of his behavior, so schizophrenia is not something that people can hide. The active signs of schizophrenia are things like hearing voices, becoming delusional, becoming paranoid. People notice that this person is acting, psychotically. They're not thinking clearly. And when I talked earlier about not thinking clearly, I wasn't talking about it necessarily in a psychotic way, because we all know, I mean, it's like when I have the flu, for a little bit, I feel like I'm never going to get better. I forget, right, that I've ever felt good. Depression can cause that as well, where I all of a sudden feel like it's never going to get better. That's not clear thinking, but that's not believing that, I'm hearing voices or somebody's talking to me directly or planting things in my head or those kinds of things. There's a difference there, clearly.
Yeah. So some interesting things that Joni just triggered in my mind. Back to Detective Sarney. We'll go around the horn here. The manifesto. There is apparently a 263-page manifesto. What does the NYPD do with that? I mean, you guys have criminal profilers, I believe, if not the FBI does. Is someone looking at that for potential clues? I mean, what do you actually do with a document besides just read it?
Well, again, the document's probably going to be photographed before no one's going to touch it. Hopefully no one touched it because, you might fume it later on, but you're going to look at it, read it. Apparently there's a lot of ranting about the healthcare industry. Apparently there's also, if I heard, incriminating evidence about the shooting, talking about parasites in the healthcare industry. There's a lot that might tend to lead to a motive of this. And that's the benefit of what he had. Again, he kept things that were near and dear to him. One is the manifesto, the gun, why didn't he dispose of the gun? There could be a myriad of reasons. He couldn't get another gun later on. He felt that, this is what, maybe he made the gun. I don't know. But all the stuff on him and that manifesto lends credence to his motive, because unfortunately he didn't tell you his motive. But now you also saw when he got out of the car for the extradition, he shouted, he yelled. He's now developing that audience, the manifesto, and people are starting to try to figure out what he wrote. They're going into social media accounts. I think he had a YouTube channel. Somebody was saying, one of the audience was saying, he had a YouTube channel. So, we can't. Did he act alone in this incident? Yes. Does he feel like other people were, and maybe there was a chat group that was part of this? Who knows? Again, this is things that can be or tertiary that might be looked at, but right now, take what you have, we'll work on it from there, and it'll branch outwards. And I think that's what an investigation does. You've got the person that you believe by probable cause did the shooting. Now we work to solidify the case. And if there's anything outside that, they'll look into it also. It's just a matter of time to do anything. It's a long case. It's 5 days, different states. He's, all these things come into play. And
let me put you on the spot. If there is a trial, which there likely will be, what are we talking? 2 years from now?
That all depends how long this takes. We always like to have a speedy trial. They're going to have the arraignment, once you arrest him, the arraignment, the paperwork involved is massive. The laws of discovery in Michigan State and New York have made this a lot more difficult, because everything, all the things that the police have and the prosecutor has, the police have to hand it over to the prosecutor has to hand it over to the defense attorney. And that's everything. Videos, surveillance, for everything they have. All of the testing has to be handed over. It's going to take a time to review all of this. And that's the thing. 2 years, maybe. It could be faster. It could be longer. Could he plead? Who knows? Could he be decide to be the martyr of this and just stand up and announce that he's guilty and I did this because of this and develop a following? Who knows? It's one of those cases that, as detectives, you love to have, but you hate to have, because it's so much involved that, takes away from family, friends, and Rich could say that too. This was those detectives in Midtown North, the homicide, didn't go home for days. And now the breather that is taking place is going to let them look over and reevaluate what they did in this case and things that they might have missed.
Yeah, this is definitely a career case. We're going to get to this question eventually, back to Dr. Joni, but Phil Waters, Houston Homicide PD, retired. There was news that the NYPD retrieved a smudged fingerprint right off a telephone, or a bottle of water, maybe. What is done with that smudged fingerprint now? What would you do with it if you were the lead homicide detective?
Well, look, when they got the water bottle, they got a couple of things they can do. Number one, they can swab it for DNA around the opening. And then they're going to hang it up and super glue it and see if they get any kind of prints. And apparently they got a partial print off of it. It's going to be down to the latent print people to see if they can identify enough whorls and factors within it that will match his fingerprints. So it will depend on the clarity of that partial print. If it's a smudge, if that's all it is a smudge where they're not really getting any ridges or whorls, then it's pretty much going to be useless. The DNA will be a factor in that, a stronger piece of evidence than this smudged fingerprint.
Yeah, and Phil, one other thing. So here he's in this turtle suit. It's from yesterday. Here he's in an orange jumpsuit, but it looks, if you look here, you can kind of see it underneath. It looks like he might have a vest on. I don't know what that is, but does this mean he's no longer under what they call direct observation, otherwise unaliving watch?
Well, I would think a guy like this, that you would have him on a 24-hour watch for a period initially here, at least. I'm not sure I would leave him to his own devices in a cell.
Yeah. Rich, what do you think? Does this look like a vest underneath here? What's your
Yeah, he's
experience?
got a vest on. Sure.
Oh, he does.
I'm sure they put one on him, just precaution wise. You know,
That's obviously to protect him from being attacked or shot by somebody, correct?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rich, so there's Detective Yusef Demes, if I'm saying it right, Demes. He's with Midtown North. I don't know if you guys know him, but he basically put together a charging document, and they outlined some of the evidence, which includes hostile surveillance footage, saying that the guy looks like him, hostile records, business records with the same ID that he was found with, the fake ID, which he was found with. And then they list the charges: murder in the second degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, again, criminal possession of a forged instrument in the second degree. So, I mean, this evidence, and someone else said it, is incredibly strong. How much stronger does it have to get? And also, just if you can, people don't understand why it's not a first degree charge. It sounds like New York has some really strict requirements in order to charge a first degree murder.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the evidence that they have there, that's sometimes more than you get in a lot of homicide cases. That's great. And what's going to really put the nail in the coffin is once they get the DNA, which will, if they have the water bottle that is his, once they swab it and then they get a court order, they'll do another swab of him to get a stronger DNA swab, and they'll compare that. And then, then he can't say, well, I was never there. I wasn't there. Well, your DNA is there. So, I think what they have now is strong. It's given them the probable cause to go ahead with this, but the DNA evidence is going to be strong in that.
We're looking at these pictures. Definitely tells a story. He doesn't look too pleased there now that he's caught. Dr. Joni, this is an interesting tidbit. They interviewed his former landlord in Hawaii, a guy named R.J. Martin. And by the way, I saw someone asking, why was the missing persons report made in San Francisco? I think he was living in different places. That was one of them. By the way, this picture on the right, I'm getting to the question in a minute, but if you look closely at the picture on the right, I tweeted this out last night at Podcast STS, Instagram, it's at Surviving the Survivor. By the way, if you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and we've got a Patreon link where we post photos like this and some behind the scenes stuff. But if you look, Dr. Joni, on the right, it's hard to tell in this photo, but it looks like he wet his pants, literally. And when the detectives say that they picked him up, that he had a very physical reaction, he was shaking. You hear the expression, peed his pants. Is that something that really happens? Because there is a large wet mark around the groin area. Is it possible that this happened?
It is possible. I mean, I know he has some back issues. I have no idea if that would also affect his physical, functioning. But certainly people, when they're afraid or terrified, can do that. It does happen. The other thing, if I could comment on that, Joel, or that I've just seen a couple of comments come across there, is about this issue of, mental health defense and needing to see a mental health professional. And I think, given the limited amount of information that we have so far, being that his mom filed a missing persons report, that he kind of went off the grid, that he appears to have been a high functioning person for much of his life, that, after he had this, from what we don't know, a lot of, I don't want to fill in a lot of blanks that I don't know yet. So is there a case potentially to be made for some kind of mental health defense or mental health issue? Yes, I think that there is. I think it's important, though, to also separate out mental health or mental illness from insanity. And so I think that's the tricky part of it is, there seems to be some evidence from the limited information we know that this guy, again, his behavior changed. This person, something happened, in his head. Something happened to him. But again, when you're talking about, insanity, you're starting to talk about things like understanding something was right or wrong, or understanding that what they're doing, the seriousness or the consequences. And when you have somebody there's such evidence of premeditation, it just becomes a bigger hurdle to overcome. There's just a big difference between the two.
Yeah, a lot of people talking about this manifesto. You see here, Shui saying it's a 3-page manifesto, 260 words. Dr. Joni, I got to ask you about this too. There's reports from this former landlord that his back injury was so bad, and some are questioning that because he's obviously riding a bike. He's running after the shooting, but apparently he could not have sex with anyone or date, his former landlord said. He said he knew that dating and being physically intimate with his back condition wasn't possible. I remember him telling me that, and my heart just breaks. I mean, is that enough motive? He's a man. I mean, we know about men. Is that enough motive? And what do you make of the fact that he's running around New York?
Well, again, I think, these could be reasons why somebody might go into a tailspin. It sounds like this, again, if the information that's coming out is correct, things I've read include that this person has always had some back issues that have been relatively chronic, that he had an injury in 2022. This all needs to be verified. And that since then his back has gotten progressively worse. And then he has his back surgery. So certainly if you're 26 years old and you're a healthy young man and you have your libido and you want a romantic relationship, it would be devastating to learn those kind of things and to feel like you couldn't function the way other people could function. You couldn't surf like other people could surf. You couldn't have sex like you would want to have. I mean, that could certainly send somebody into a tailspin. Is that a reason why, or, is that a credible motive for murder? No, it's not a heroic thing to ever shoot somebody in the back who doesn't see you coming. At the same time, it certainly can be a cause or a precipitant for a significant depression.
Yeah. I could go on for 9 more hours, but I got to respect these guys and women's time here. So a couple of very quick things here. I'm going to hold off on reading any of this manifesto because I want to make 1,000% sure it is the right one. I believe it is, but I want to be sure before I do that on air. You guys might not have heard, but today there was a crazy flow of 1-star reviews for McDonald's. I guess in protest to this guy's arrest. So, so Google had to get involved and un-1-star them. David Sarney, he's a retired detective, 27 years. He teaches at John Jay. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending more time. You're just shaking your head about the McDonald's reviews. Your thoughts on that and your final thoughts.
The keyboard warriors are in full effect on this. It's so sad. That's the problem. You're seeing the anti-hero being developed by a lot of the social media out there, and people forget that there are kids without a father. There are people out there, a man who was callously murdered in the streets of New York because someone thought they were justified in doing it. No justification for what happened on that Wednesday morning. And the benefit is apparently the person who did it is off the streets right now. And the work of the detectives, NYPD, continues when I retire, and they'll continue onward when I'm buried in the ground. And I have to appreciate what they do. And, this is one thing that detectives do the best is they work diligently to get the best results and in the interest of doing what's right. So that's what I have to say.
The NYPD and the Houston PD, two of the best at what they do. This is retired NYPD Richard Kaprowski. Richard, thanks for coming on. I know it was a last second ask, so really appreciate it. No one of the other things here today, it was kind of predicted, by the way, this is a nice looking layout, COE, but today, as predicted, both the Altoona police and residents in Altoona started receiving a ton of threats, which they had to start investigating. I feel like we're living in an upside down world, Rich, when these, they're getting threats for getting a guy that killed somebody. your thoughts on that, your final thoughts about where this investigation heads next.
I mean, that's just, people don't never cease to amaze me. It's just, it's sad to see that that's what people are trying to ruin a business, give death threats to people. These people have families too, and people are going to be worried. It's just uncalled for. As far as the investigation, this investigation has been worked to the bone and has done a great job. I mean, I've been on cases like this, and I know the work that has to be put into it and the hours, and they did an excellent job, and they're going to continue to do it.
By the way, we made a commitment 2025. It's a little early to cover breaking news, and we're doing a lot of it these days. So shout out to the COE. She's the glue, the chief of everything. Obviously, Steve Cohen booking these best guests. Space Coast on the West Coast. He handles all the audio and many more things besides that. And, of course, the amazing mods and members of STS Nation who will always come through. You guys are emailing me and sending me stuff, and I cannot appreciate it enough. It really helps me. And, Elaine, thank you. I hope some people found us during the course of this story. And if you did, please subscribe, and we'll keep pumping out the content. Dr. Joni Johnson, she's a forensic psychologist, a private investigator, a crime writer. She works with criminals. She's the author of Serial Killers, 101 Questions True Crime Fans Asks. And she also hosts her own YouTube channel, Unmasking a Murderer. There was an interesting tidbit, Dr. Joni, that he was in his yearbook named the guy with the best pickup lines. That was one of them, that he has the best pickup lines in school. His nicknames, he had a bunch of nicknames, including Pepperoni, Squeegee, and 30 Degrees. I have no idea what that is. Everybody said he was a very normal guy, a smart kid. Anything to read into the fact that he had the best pickup lines? Maybe he was a smooth operator. And your final thoughts on this person and what his mental state might be tonight.
I guess I want to just reiterate that, it's how important it is to remember Brian Thomas and his family and all the pain that they're going through. And we all know that murder ripples outward. And so we don't even know how many people this act has touched with people. And I guess the other thing I would say is kind of a mantra of mine. And that is, as a psychologist, I certainly understand physical and psychological pain, and how important it is to find some way to get support and help for that. But having feelings, having trauma, having grief is never an excuse to hurt somebody else. And so I think that I'd like to think that if this is the perpetrator, if he had been able to access that we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this case today.
Well said. Last but certainly not least, America's most respected detective with the best fedora in the business, with all due respect to all the other NYPD detectives and Houston PD, of course. But look at that hat. By the way, this guy drives a Ferrari. He is the real life Magnum PI. 23 years working as a homicide detective in the Houston PD, investigated over 400 cases, 96% clearance rate, 93% confession rate. I don't know if that's the right word for that. Phil Waters, the floor is open to you. By the way, you've got an open invite anytime you want, Phil. I didn't ask you last night because I don't like to overstep my bounds with legendary detectives, but now I know I can bug you. Your final thoughts.
Well, I know it will reflect on my check. So
it's coming. It's in the mail.
Look, I think it's already been said. I just would echo what everybody has said here. And I would just remind people that put yourself in the Thompson family's position and put yourself in the Mangione family's position, and reflect a little bit on how that would affect you if you were in those places, and get off of this. We're happy this all happened. That to me is that is disturbing as a societal issue, that we have a number of people, but we understand we've got generations of people that have been raised with no respect for human life. We've got generations of people that don't have any respect for law enforcement, for authority. And we're seeing it manifest itself in acts like this. So I think we need to take a step back and take a hard look at what causes these kinds of things. There's evil in the world. And this is what we've seen in that video. And it's in everybody's face. So, but kudos again. I want to, what Rick and David were talking about, kudos again to these detectives. We've worked those kind of cases, and you hit the ground running. And I will tell you, you hit the bricks. And I think it was the commander of that unit. I don't know if he was the chief of detectives, but he was one of the upper echelon people there in NYPD at that press conference where they had all the detectives standing behind him. And he said, look behind me. These are the guys that did it. These are the guys that didn't stop. These are the guys that went without sleep for days to make sure this thing happened. And the three of us here can empathize with that. We've all been there. So kudos, man. My hat's off to those guys.
Can't say it any better than that. The topic really should be this guy, Brian Thompson. He was laid to rest yesterday, shot in the back, killed in Midtown Manhattan. One of the crazier stories and upsetting and distressing stories that we've covered. There's going to continue to be a lot of developments. We'll stay on it. We are doing another show, 7 p.m. tonight, because it is our original case. Donna Sue Adelson was in court. She's the matriarch accused of a murder for hire plot against Harvard graduate Dan Markel, who was an FSU law professor. She had her own son-in-law murdered, and now she's about to stand trial, and it's not looking good for her. But huge shout out to these guests, David Sarney, Richard Kaprowski, Phil Waters, and of course, Dr. Joni Johnson, the only woman on the panel, and perhaps the smartest of all of us, I would say. Love you, America. Love you, Houston. Love you, San Diego. And love you, New York, NYPD. Let's think about Brian Thompson's family. Take care, everybody. Guys, stick around 1 second.